Hello and welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written in Indianapolis by Dr. Adrian Peterson and produced in the studios of WRMI Shortwave in Okeechobee, Florida. I'm Jeff White. Today on Wavescan, tribute to Shortwave WYFR, Part 8, The Final Years with Walter Lemon. The story of a de-expedition on the Bay of Bengal coastline in India. And our Australian DX report. Well, in our continuing saga about the long and illustrious history of the shortwave station that finally became WYFR and then WRMI, we pick up the chain of events in the middle of the year 1953. Ray Robinson of KVOH has the story.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. This time we have Episode 8 in the story, The Final Years with Walter Lemon. At this stage, station WRUL, as it was at the time, was on the air at Hatherley Beach with 5 transmitters, 3 at 50 kilowatts, 1 at 20 kilowatts, and 1 at either 7 or 80 kilowatts, depending on whether or not they were using a huge power amplifier. On June 30th, 1953, the 5 WRUL transmitters were officially released from service with the Voice of America, and the station was reverted back to regular programming under its ownership with Walter Lemon. The usage of the Boston studios had ended 2 years earlier, and WRUL had established a New York office at 1 East 57th Street, which according to the city address list is now the location for the voluminous fashion icon Louis Vuitton store. A few blocks away was the original location for the production and on-air studios of the Voice of America. At the same time as WRUL was released from VOA service in mid-1953, so also was the Westinghouse shortwave station WBOS at Hull, located at the end of the Nantasket Peninsula out from Boston. Westinghouse then closed this station and sold the equipment to WRUL at Hatherley Beach. The leftover equipment from the 2 transmitters, WBOS and WPIT, at Hull, was incorporated into the WRUL facility, though never as a separate transmitter unit. At this stage, WRUL was no longer an official relay station for the Voice of America with programming from VOA and the Armed Forces Radio Service. Then, in 1960, the 65-year-old Walter Lemon relinquished control of the station, selling it off to Metro Media in New York. At this stage, the same 5 transmitters were still in use, 3 at 50 kilowatts, 1 at 20 kilowatts, and 1 at 80. Metro Media, or that is Metropolitan Broadcasters of New York, also owned medium wave WNEW, as well as a small network of radio and television stations across the country. They transferred the studios for their new shortwave acquisition into 4 West 58th Street, the location of the famed Paris Theatre, quite near to Central Park. This new suite of radio studios was titled the Worldwide Communication Center. However, Metro Media retained the usage of the Hatherley Beach shortwave station for just 3 years, after which they sold it off to the International Educational Broadcasting Corporation, IEBC, in Salt Lake City, Utah, for $1.75 million. This change of ownership was effective on October 10th, 1962, and a new on-air slogan was introduced, Radio New York Worldwide, though the old and familiar call sign WRUL was still retained. At this stage, the same 5 transmitters were on the air, though they were now listed as 4 at 50 kilowatts and 1 at 80 kilowatts, and a total of 11 antenna systems were also in use. Soon after IEBC had obtained WRUL at Hatherley Beach, this organization morphed into Bonneville International, both of which had close ties with the Mormon Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Interestingly, there was a previous attempt on the part of the Mormon Church to go shortwave, and this was back in the year 1939. At that time, the experimental shortwave broadcasting station W9XAA was on the air in Chicago with a 500-watt transmitter located at suburban Downers Grove. This shortwave station was owned by Chicago Federation of Labor, who also operated the well-known medium wave station WCFL. The Chicago Federation of Labor in Chicago wanted to sell its co-owned shortwave station W9XAA to medium wave KSL in Salt Lake City, Utah. They lodged a request with the FCC to sell the station, increase its power, and move it to Saltaire, near Salt Lake City. However, in September 1939, the FCC denied this request, and so this first attempt on the part of the Mormon Church to establish a shortwave station came to nothing. Returning to the story of the Boston shortwave station, we might add that in the year 1964, the long-standing Adventist radio program Voice of Prophecy, with the illustrious Dr. H.M.S. Richards, was on the air from the shortwave station WRUL twice each Sunday. At both 1200 and 1900 GMT, as it was in those days, or UTC as it is today, this half-hour program was noted on all four active transmitters in parallel, on 11950, 15385, 15440, and 17760 kHz.
Lift up the trumpet and loud let it ring, Jesus is coming again. Cheer up, ye pilgrims, be joyful and sing. Jesus is coming again.
This is the voice of prophecy, a voice crying in the wilderness of these modern days. Prepare ye the way of the Lord.
Coming again, Jesus is coming again.
From our Voice of Prophecy studios in Los Angeles, California, we welcome you to this half hour of inspiration and music with the King's Heralds, Del Delker, Brad Braley, and our speaker, H.M.S. Richards, a Seventh-day Adventist minister.
The vigorous radio entrepreneur Walter Lemon was born in New York City on February 3, 1896, and on March 1, 1967, he passed to his rest at Old Greenwich, Connecticut, aged 71. He gained a BSc degree in electrical engineering at Columbia University in New York City. As Lieutenant Walter Lemon with the Coast Guard, he was appointed as a wireless operator on board the Navy vessel USS George Washington, and he also served as wireless operator for President Woodrow Wilson at the Versailles Peace Conference in 1919. While the ship was anchored in port at Brest Harbor in France, he made a series of experimental radio broadcasts containing news about the peace conference. On the return journey across the Atlantic, Walter Lemon, aboard the George Washington, presented several broadcasts of recorded music for the benefit of nearby ships and for listeners along the eastern seaboard of the United States. When the ship was still 300 miles from port, he persuaded President Wilson to make a special 4th of July radio broadcast to the United States. Wilson did indeed make a brief speech in between music items during the Independence Day broadcast, though he stood so far away from the microphone that his words were not heard clearly in the broadcast. A news reporter subsequently reread the speech, which this time was transmitted quite clearly. 10 years later, Walter Lemon became the general manager for shortwave station W2XAL in Coatesville, New Jersey, a station that he bought 2 years later and ultimately transferred to Boston in association with TV experimenter Hollis Baird. Lemon managed the Boston shortwave station WRUL for a period of nearly 30 years, running from 1931 right up to the year 1960, developing it into one of the world's largest and most powerful shortwave stations in the middle of the last century. Walter Lemon invented the three-gang tuning condenser, which he sold to RCA for $1 million, and he also invented the radio typewriter, which enabled type messages to be transmitted by radio and instantly received on a similar typewriter anywhere in the world. He was also an executive with the IBM Corporation, and in addition to his management of shortwave WRUL, Lemon was the manager of an early FM station, WGCH 95.9 MHz, in Greenwich, Connecticut. Walter Lemon sold his shortwave station WRUL in 1960. He went into retirement at the age of 64 and died 7 years later. By this time, his shortwave station was now on the air under the new call sign WNYW. But that's a story for next time.
You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. Send your comments and reception reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229 in the United States. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229 in the USA. Or you can email us at wavescan@awr.org. Our email once again, wavescan@awr.org.
Wavescan presents Focus on Asia, a year-long series of reports about shortwave broadcasting and listening on the continent of Asia. Well, today we have a special report from our DX correspondent Prithviraj Purkayastha in India. And he tells us about a story of 5 radio enthusiasts from eastern India who are members of the Asian DX League. Recently they had some interesting experience on a DXpedition. The story was shared by Rajdeep Das of this DXpedition team and a regular listener of the Indian DX Report. Here's Prithviraj.
This first DXpedition of Asian DX League was organized from 17th to 19th January at Mandarmani, a coastal town on the Bay of Bengal coastline, some 160 kilometers from Kolkata in West Bengal. DXers chose this place for the expedition as this age of modern technology, Mandarmani coastal area does not have electricity, and so there is very less electric noise occur while listening radio. During dark hours, only DG set produce some light, that too on demand. The expedition team stayed at Samudra Vilas Resort, which has some great facility for arranging external long-wire antennas and beverages, etc. And the team set up 3 long-wire antennas in south and southeast direction targeting Oceania and Papua New Guinea. Another one west by northwest targeting Europe and Caribbean, and a 60-meter wire running south by southwest targeting Africa. The DX bugs enjoyed thoroughly distance radio listening, logged few rare stations which are very hard to hear in busy urban atmosphere, starting from SIBC from Solomon Island and NBC New Ireland from Papua New Guinea. This magnificent DX journey crosses through many African, European nations and countries from Asia Pacific. I wish this DX journey of Asian DX League will continue in coming years also, and we wish them best of luck from Indian DX Report.
Well, thank you very much, Prithviraj Purkayastha there in India. And now let's go to Bob Padula in Australia with DX News on Wavescan.
All times, days and dates given in our episodes are in UTC, and we use the 24-hour time system. The episodes are compiled from resources made available by the Electronic DXpress Radio Monitoring Association, which is based here in Melbourne.
Solar activity continues to be classified as low by the Ionospheric Prediction Service here in New South Wales in Australia. The latest information from the IPS is that the 10.7 centimetre solar radio flux is now at 160. That's 160, and the daily equivalent smooth sunspot number has fallen to 114. That's 114. The IPS also reports that those figures are likely to decrease further in the immediate future, and they could be down as low as 150 for the 10.7 centimetre flux, and 105. That's 105 for the sunspot number. So conditions on the higher bands, that's above about 14 megahertz, are subject to some unreliability of late, particularly over darkness or semi-darkness paths above about 14 megahertz over multi-hop routes. But propagation on frequencies above about 40 megahertz on daylight paths will continue to be satisfactory. Now we have some information now concerning monitoring made here in Melbourne recently. First of all, the 9 megahertz band has revealed quite a high degree of occupancy in our mornings. The spectrum continues to be dominated by many short path transmissions from China Radio International with its broadcast to Europe. This is a summary of sample entries in the time span 1900 to 1930, which I made here in suburban Melbourne. 9390 Thailand, the Voice of America from Udon. 9425 Voice of Korea from North Korea, Pyongyang in German. 9440 China Radio International from Kunming in English, and All India Radio Delhi on 9445 in English and 9470 with the national network. 9505, this frequency is occupied by a station known as the Voice of Africa, broadcasting in Hausa from Al Ittihad in the Sudan. 9525, the Voice of Indonesia, quite good reception from Jakarta in English. And 9545, the Solomon Islands Broadcasting Corporation English, this station signs on each day between 1900 and 1910. On the next frequency, 9550, Ibra Radio, the religious broadcaster using facilities at Kigali in Rwanda, observed with Arabic. And 9560, another frequency for China Radio International from Urumqi in Hungarian. 9570, the Voice of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Hausa, to signing off at 1917. And on the adjacent channel, 9575, Radio Mediterranean at Morocco from the Nador transmitting site in Arabic. And some more frequencies for China Radio International, 9615 from Urumqi in German, 9645 from Kunming in French, 9655 again from Kunming in Turkish, and 9730 from Kashi in Portuguese, with interference from the Voice of Vietnam also using that frequency at that time. And the final frequency for CRI is 9770 from Kashi in Cantonese. Now, 9715, the Bible Voice Broadcasting Station, using relay facilities at Moosbrunn in Austria in English. And the Voice of Vietnam from Hanoi, broadcasting in English on 9730. And 9815, a station known as Hello Darfur, broadcasting from the Nauen transmitting site, the relay site in Germany, in Sudanese. And 9825, the Philippines Broadcasting Service, using transmitter at Penang, broadcasting in English. And 9835, Radio Television Malaysia from Kajang in Malay, relaying the home service or home service program. And finally 9965, right up at the top end of the 31 metre band, Radio Thailand, broadcasting from the Udon transmitting site in English. So quite a lot of activity, quite a lot of action in the 31 metre band, as noted here in Melbourne recently, during our post-sunrise period between 1900 and 1930. The 6 megahertz activity post-sunrise here in Melbourne, it's also been giving quite good propagation. This band is heavily gridlocked in our sunrise period, that's between 1830 and 1900. This is dominated by short path signals from Europe, the Middle East, Africa and Asia. And some of the frequencies noted recently, despite the interference, the co-channel interference on many frequencies, 5830 Radio Fardar from Kuwait in Persian, 3 frequencies for the Voice of the Islamic Republic of Iran, 5925 in Albanian, 6135 in Italian, and 6140 in Bosnian. And 6003, that's the correct frequency, 6003, South Korea, station known as Echo of Hope, located at Kujang. It broadcasts programs to Korea, but it's jammed after 1900. And 6180, South Africa, Radio France International from Maiaton in Portuguese, signing on at 1900. And earlier in the morning, on the 13 megahertz band between 1730 and 1800, that's in our pre-dawn period here in Melbourne, this band has been giving good short-path signals from the Middle East, Asia, Africa and Europe. And these are some of the signals noted. 13580, Voice of America from Irana Villa in Sri Lanka in Persian. 13630, the Voice of America in Portuguese from Botswana. 13640, All India Radio from Delhi in Arabic. 13710, the Saudi Arabian Broadcasting Service from Riyadh in Arabic. And 13730, Radio Japan NHK from the Talata, Madagascar relay station, broadcasting in Swahili. So quite a lot of activity in our morning periods, as noted here in Melbourne, with quite good reception on many frequencies on those bands which are actually propagating at. It's been reported by the Bulgarian DX blog, which is actually produced by people who were previously involved with frequency planning and monitoring for the now defunct broadcasts of Radio Bulgaria on shortwave. The people at the Voice of Mongolia is said to be non-active at present on shortwave, according to the Bulgarian DX blog. And this report was exactly made by monitoring in Bulgaria by remote receivers located in Asia and Australia. It's not known whether this is a temporary relaxation or temporary cancellation of the broadcast from Mongolia, but the latest schedule did show that English was to be broadcast from Mongolia, from Ulaanbaatar, 0900 to 0930 and 1400 to 1430 on 12085. So I'm not quite sure what's happening with the Voice of Mongolia, whether it's closed down permanently, whether it's only a temporary problem. Frequency change for the IBB in Washington. This frequency is 9380 between midnight 30 and 0100 from the Philippines, and that is to Central Asia, carrying Learning English programs. That replaces 9790. Another Learning English broadcast on the new frequency from the Voice of America is 12015, also from the Philippines, between midnight 30 and 0100. That replaces 11695. And 1400 to 1500, the new frequency is 7580 from Irana Villa in Sri Lanka, broadcasting to Southern Asia in English. That replaces 7520. Same frequency is used 1500 to 1600 to Southern Asia in English, again replacing 7520. And the IBB's Radio Liberty broadcasts in Russian, 1900 to 2000 on the new frequency of 7225 from Lampertheim in Germany to Central Asia. That replaces 9515. Also from the Bulgarian DX blog, we learn that the Voice of Nigeria has been heard again on the previously inactive frequency of 15120. English between 0915 and 1002. And also, well, that replaces 9690. And 0500 or 0700 on the same frequency, 15120. So, looks like Voice of Nigeria has reactivated its 15 megahertz channel after an absence. The seats will alternate between 15120 and 9690.
And that's all we have time for in our episode of the Australian DX Report, which came to you from Melbourne in Victoria, Australia. I'd just like to remind you that we offer full detail QSL cards showing Australian scenes and wildlife for correct reports received for these broadcasts. We also offer an email QSL service for reports sent by the internet or email. Full details about the QSL service are available at the Electronic DXpress homepage, which is simply edxp.org. So until our next program, this is Bob Padula in Melbourne in Victoria, Australia, wishing you all good listening. Thanks for being with us and good DX. See you soon.
We end today's edition of Wavescan with some gamelan music, traditional music of the island of Bali in Indonesia. This program was researched and written by Adrian Peterson in Indianapolis. Next week, Focus on Asia Philippines, Part 7, Tunnel Radio at Corregidor. Also our Japan DX report. If you'd like a Wavescan QSL card, you can send your reception reports to Wavescan Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229, USA. That's Wavescan Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229, USA. Our email address is wavescan@awr.org. That's wavescan@awr.org. And now on behalf of our editor Adrian Peterson, Ray Robinson of KVOH, and our DX reporters around the world, I'm Jeff White at WRMI in Okeechobee, Florida, wishing you good listening wherever in the world you may be. Until next week.